I'm Bill Rakoff from the International Association of Fire Chiefs in Chantilly, Virginia. And joining me this morning is Chief David Downey. He's the retired fire chief of Miami-Dade Fire Rescue. He is the chair of the IAFC's Urban Search and Rescue Committee. He has served as a leader with Florida's Task Force One and has responded to disasters around the world. Very qualified to speak on this subject. Chief, thanks for your time today. I want to talk about Hurricane Ian for a moment from a large perspective and ask you what makes this storm unique, particularly from a responder's perspective.
Well, the uniqueness of it was the amount so far that we're seeing of the storm surge and the amount of water that it inundated the areas where it's impacted, and the continued rain that's associated with this storm that's just further soaking the areas that have already been overwhelmed. So our rivers are swelling, our lakes and ponds are swelling, so while this one was had a significant wind component, by far what we're seeing initially is the surge, and the water is going to be the big issue with this storm.
And not just localized like Charlie a few years ago. Again, that the scope of this storm and the damage and the people impacted are impressive, from the Gulf Coast all the way over to the Atlantic coast.
Absolutely. And Charlie, was a much faster moving storm, much more compact, while it had significant winds. And I responded to the aftermath on the west coast of Hurricane Charlie, and it was devastating. But to put it in perspective, the entire storm of Hurricane Charlie would fit into the eye wall of Hurricane Ian. So Ian was is a massive storm with a massive eye wall that had caused significant damage.
So the response mode now in full swing, particularly along the Gulf Coast. Let's talk about the resources at hand now from an urban search and rescue perspective to assist local responders, and what more might be available if necessary.
So here in Florida, we've got a very robust urban search and rescue team within the state. We have 9 task forces of varying sizes within the state of Florida. And depending on areas that were going to be impacted, many of these task forces were mobilized. We mobilized our resources that we could way ahead of the storm. They were mobilized as early as Tuesday, assembled, and then pre-positioned. We also leaned on our federal partners, who initially started pre-positioning resources outside of the state in anticipation of a need. And we also moved those resources down. And our last component is our Florida National Guard, that has a search and rescue component that we've also joined up with our US&R. So we've got a very robust US&R presence. They were pre-positioned way ahead of the storm in areas where they could come in behind the storm and do the greatest good as quickly as possible.
So as a fire chief who's had to deal locally with hurricanes before, got the been there, done that t-shirt, if you will, give me a sense of the strategy now from a command perspective and an administrative perspective, not just now and not just responding to the community, but responding to the department's needs as well in the days and the weeks to come.
Well, the biggest thing I could say is ask for help. And these firefighters, emergency responders, all first responders are already worn down before the storm even hit, and they were working through the storm, and they're going to need relief. And again, we learned 30 years ago now, with the devastation of Hurricane Andrew, how important it is to provide some relief for those firefighters, as well as do the damage assessment of the fire stations, the apparatus possible. But we're going to have to remember that those first responders that are out there running calls right now, also a lot of them have had significant damage to their homes, might have lost their homes, and right now are tending to the community. So as soon as we can get in there and provide some extra relief, and as fire chief, one of the things that I would think about was, how can I start rotating personnel? Those that weren't impacted can continue to work. Those that were, let's give them some time to take care of their personal needs. And so the message is to the fire chiefs out there, don't be afraid to ask for help.
The IAFC, in terms of that, is curating and maintaining a list of relevant resources for responders on our website, and includes GIS resources, search and rescue resources, the NOAA information, etc. Explain how those resources can be utilized on the ground and why they're important to boots on the ground for leaders in command.
Well, it's given us a common operating picture. So everybody's working off the same sheet of music, and they're being able to feed the data in real time. And I can sit here in my house in South Florida, or they can sit in the EOC in Tallahassee or our command center in Orlando and watch real time the interaction that our USAR resources have out there in the field and be able to respond to that. We also can be able to send messages. Throughout the storm, we were collecting information as far as people trapped, people calling, texting, no matter how it was being communicated, making sure that we're collecting that information, sharing it with the local responders, but making sure that those needs were addressed. So these applications help us tremendously.
The IAFC, once again, is maintaining that list. If you'd like to see it, at iafc.org. It's being continually updated as resources are being added and the situation develops. Chief David Downey, retired chief of Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, well experienced with Florida Task Force 1 and others, and still serving in a role in a state capacity. We want to thank you very much for your time. We know you're busy, but appreciate you spending a few minutes with us.
Thanks for having me.